Good evening, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. This is Rich again, back for your third and final video blog of the night for Friday, May 15th, 2015, around 7:50 in the evening, Belleville, Massachusetts. Sun's going down. It was a mix of sun and clouds today. Highs were in the 60s. Maybe some rain showers Saturday morning, but Saturday afternoon and Sunday should be real nice. And that's about it on news. My third and final video blog subject of the night is about the 22-year drought of the Stanley Cup not being won by a Canadian-based NHL team. The Stanley Cup was formed in 1893, and it's been won by many Canadian teams before. Before 1917, or most of them were Canadian-based teams winning it. And when the NHL took the Stanley Cup over in 1925-1926, it was either the Canadiens or the Maple Leafs and the Edmonton Oilers or the Calgary Flames winning it. And since the Montreal Canadiens beat the Los Angeles Kings to win the 1993 Stanley Cup, the Cup has been droughtless in Canada. Since then, every Stanley Cup winner has been a United States-based NHL team. And since the Canadiens last won the Stanley Cup in 1993, 5 times Canadian-based NHL teams were in the Stanley Cup Finals. 1994 it was Vancouver Canucks versus the New York Rangers. 2004 the Calgary Flames against the Tampa Bay Lightning. 2006 the Edmonton Oilers against the Carolina Hurricanes. 2007 it was the Ottawa Senators against the Anaheim Ducks. And in 2011 the Vancouver Canucks against the Boston Bruins. And 4 out of those 5 Stanley Cup series went to full 7 games. So that it was just one win away 4 times that a Canadian team could have won the Stanley Cup, and they could have ended the drought. The drought had followed in 1994. The Vancouver Canucks, they were led by Pavel Bure and Trevor Linden and Kurt McLean in goal. They faced off against the New York Rangers, looking to break a 54-year-old Stanley Cup drought. The Rangers were led by Mark Messier and Brian Leach and Mike Richter and a few others. And the Rangers went up 3-1 on the Canucks in the series, but the Canucks fought back for games 5 and 6. They won, and then they faced off in Game 7 at Madison Square Garden, and the New York Rangers broke the 54-year-old curse by beating the Vancouver Canucks and winning the Stanley Cup for the first time in 54 years. The Canucks were not going to win Game 7 at Madison Square Garden. And then there was a 10-year drought of a Canadian team not making the Stanley Cup Finals. In 1995, the Quebec Nordiques moved out of Quebec and they became the Colorado Avalanche. And the next year, 1996, Colorado Avalanche won the Stanley Cup. The Stanley Cup also went to Colorado in 2001. I don't know if the Nordiques would have won the cup if they were still in Quebec, but if they did, the fans in Montreal would probably be rioting like crazy because they didn't want to see their arch rival win the Stanley Cup before they did. And it's from 1995 to 2004, no Canadian NHL team was a serious threat to the Stanley Cup. A couple of times they made the Eastern Conference Finals. The Toronto Maple Leafs in 1999 and 2002, they were coached by Pat Quinn and they were led by Matt Sundin and Curtis Joseph in gold. But both times in 1999, they faced off against the Buffalo Sabres. Buffalo Sabres had the world's best goaltender at the time, Dominic Hasek. Sabres beat the Maple Leafs to make it to the Stanley Cup Finals in 1999. In 2002, the Toronto Maple Leafs lost to the Carolina Hurricanes, which was a Cinderella story. even if like the Toronto Maple Leafs made the Stanley Cup Finals in 1999 or in 2002, they were not going to win the Stanley Cup because the Dallas Stars, who won it in 1999, and the Detroit Red Wings in 2002 had much superior teams than the Toronto Maple Leafs those years. 2003, the Ottawa Senators made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. The Ottawa Senators had the best record in the National Hockey League overall in the regular season. 2002, 2003, they won the President's Trophy, and they had a decent team. They had Captain Daniel Eriksson, they had Marian Hossa, they had Zdeno Chara on defense, and they had Patrick Lalime in goaltending, and they had a great regular season. They did pretty good in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but they faced off against New Jersey Devils in the Eastern Conference Finals, and the New Jersey Devils beat the Ottawa Senators 4-3. The deciding thing was Martin Brodeur, who was the best goaltender in the NHL at that time, and they had great defense, the Devils and stuff. If the Ottawa Senators somehow won that series, they probably would have won the Stanley Cup that year against the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, but they had Mighty Ducks of Anaheim's goaltender John Sager-Bear was having a great season, having a great Stanley Cup, and I don't know if that would if like the Ducks would stop the Senators, but I have a feeling the Senators would have won the Stanley Cup in 2003. My humble opinion. In 2004, the Calgary Flames, who was a 6th seed in the Western Conference, led by Jerome McGinley and Murray Kispersock in gold, steamed through the Western Conference playoffs. They beat the Vancouver Canucks in the first round, the Detroit Red Wings in the second round, and the San Jose Sharks in the third round, the Western Conference Finals, and then they faced off against Tampa Bay Lightning, who were the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. And this was a back-and-forth Stanley Cup playoffs championship. The Flames had a 3-2 series lead, and then it went to Game 6 at the Saddle Dome in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. There was controversy because Nikolai Harvey-Rulon made a save over Martin Jelleris, which was kind of controversial because he saved it at the goal line, and there was sometimes replay showed it was trickled in just a little bit and stuff, but they said it was a save, it was no goal. A lot of Calgary fans were mad about that because if that goal was allowed, then the Flames probably would have won the 2004 Stanley Cup. But luck would have it, the game goes into double overtime. Tampa Bay Lightning score. Even the series 3 games apiece, it goes back to Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay wins it, and they win the Stanley Cup for Dave Andreychuk, his first Stanley Cup, and Calgary Flames continues the drought for Canada. Disappointing. Flames should have won that 2004 Stanley Cup, in my opinion. Then there was no NHL season 2004-2005 due to a lockout, so no Stanley Cup, so the drought continues. 2006 Stanley Cup Finals were the Carolina Hurricanes against the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers were a Cinderella story. They were the number 8 seed in the Western Conference. They beat the Detroit Red Wings, the San Jose Sharks, and the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. And they were basically led by Dwayne Ralston, who was a journeyman goaltender and stuff. And also the Oilers had Chris Pronger on defense, and they faced off against Carolina Hurricanes, and the Hurricanes went up 3-1 in the series, but Oilers fought back for games 5, 6 winning. Then it was game 7, and then Carolina beat the Oilers to win the Stanley Cup, continuing the drought of the Canadian teams not winning the Stanley Cup at 13 years. I don't know if the Oilers would have won the Stanley Cup, but the Oilers were a fluke team. They have not been to the playoffs ever since that game. And also the Carolina Hurricanes were also kind of a fluke Stanley Cup champion because they only made the Stanley Cup playoffs once since they won the Stanley Cup. 2007, was the Ottawa Senators. They made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. They steamed through for the Eastern Conference playoffs with good goaltender by Ray Emery and stuff. And they had like Daniel Affelson and a couple of other players. But they faced off against the Anaheim Ducks in the Western Conference, and the Anaheim Ducks beat the Ottawa Senators 4-1 in 2007 Stanley Cup Finals, and the Senators were not legitimate favorites to win that Stanley Cup. And 2008, 2009, 2000, and 2010, the drought continues for the Stanley Cup not being in Canada, went by a Canadian team winning it. 2010, there was kind of a Cinderella story. The Montreal Canadiens with Jermaine Haslick in gold. He actually took over the #1 position for Carey Price that year, and the Montreal Canadiens were a #8 seed. They beat the Capitals and the Penguins in the first 2 rounds, but when they faced off against the Flyers in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Flyers beat them. And even if the Canadiens would have made the Stanley Cup Finals in 2010, I don't think they would have won because the Blackhawks were going to beat them easily. 2011 was a different story. The Vancouver Canucks had the best record in the National Hockey League during the 2010-2011 season. They had the Sundin twins, Ryan Kessler, Roberto Luongo in goal. They were the odds-on favorite to win the Stanley Cup in 2011. They beat the Chicago Blackhawks in the first round of the playoffs in 7 games. They almost blew a 3-0 series lead, but luckily they won in overtime in Game 7. They handled the Nashville Predators pretty easily, and San Jose Sharks pretty easily. And then in the Stanley Cup Finals, they faced off against the Boston Bruins. Boston Bruins had Tim Thomas in net, and it was actually an evenly matched series through the first 6 games and stuff. The Canucks won all their games in Vancouver, and the Bruins won all their games in Boston. And when a game came down to Game 7, the Boston Bruins beat the Vancouver Canucks, shut out 4-0, and the Boston Bruins won the first Stanley Cup in 39 long years to get the duck boat ready. And that 2011 Vancouver Canucks team was probably the best team out of all the Canadian teams since the drought started in 1993 that I could say should have won the Stanley Cup that year. But luck with Canada not winning the Stanley Cup, the drought continues. It continues on in 2012 because there were only 2 Canadian teams that qualified for the playoffs, the Canucks and the Senators, but they were bounced in the first round, so the streak goes to 19. 2013, it was another streak that didn't end. It didn't end in 2013. 2014, the Montreal Canadiens make it to the Stanley Cup semifinals, Eastern Conference Finals, facing off against the New York Rangers. But Carey Price suffers an injury, and a lot of people are saying if he did not suffer an injury, the Canadiens probably would have made the Stanley Cup Finals, but I don't think they would have won because the Los Angeles Kings were so hot. And in 2015, the Canadiens and Senators and the Canucks and the Flames and the Jets made the playoffs, but all 5 teams were eliminated in the playoffs before the conference finals and stuff. And you have it 22 straight years without a Stanley Cup winning team out of Canada, and it could be a very long time before a Canadian team ever wins the Stanley Cup again. A lot of people are saying that probably the best odds Canadian team next to win it's probably the Montreal Canadiens because they have Carey Price and PK Subban, two of the best players in their position, goaltender and defense, but the Canadians do not have a sharpshooter or any scoring and stuff. The Ottawa Senators were a feel-good story this playoff season because of journeyman goaltender Andrew Hammond, also nicknamed the Hamburglar, but the Senators might not re-sign him, and the Senators might be just barely fighting for a playoff spot next year. the Toronto Maple Leafs, it could be years away before they're serious Stanley Cup contenders. They need to rebuild that team and stuff, and it's been close to 50 years since the Maple Leafs made the Stanley Cup Finals, never mind winning it. And like the Winnipeg Jets, well, kind of a few good story this year in the NHL, but they could be like a 500 team and stuff. There's a lot of players in the NHL, specifically in their contract, do not want to play for Winnipeg. I don't know, for one reason or another. Calgary Flames were like a very surprise story this year. They were a year ahead of their rebuilding process, making the playoffs very quickly and going into the second round of the playoffs, but they got bounced by the Ducks. And a lot of experts are saying they might take a step back next year, but their rebuilding process is pretty good. I still think Calgary Flames could be a playoff contender for several years to come. The Vancouver Canucks are like kind of on the way down. The Sundin Twins are like the downside of their career. Ryan Miller was on and off hurt and stuff, and it could be several years before the Canucks are serious cup contenders again. And the Edmonton Oilers got the #1 pick again for the 4th time in like 7 years. They have a new general manager, Peter Chiarelli, and a new coach who's going to be Todd McClellan. But I don't know if the Edmonton Oilers are going to be very good, because, you know, another #1 pick, even though they say Connor McDavid's going to be the next big thing. I don't know if he's going to gel with them and stuff, or he could be a big flop but Connor David is one of those generational players, Connor McDavid, but I don't know how long he'll be in Edmonton if they keep losing and stuff. So I think eventually a Canadian-based NHL team's going to win the Stanley Cup again, but it could be several years away, in my opinion. Could be another 22 years. Hope not, but it wouldn't surprise me. And that's about it on that. Be back tomorrow, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. 3 more video blogs coming. First video blog will be about the top 10 players in Milwaukee Bucks history. Then the second video blog of the day will be about the pro wrestling tag team, the Steiner brothers. And the third and final video blog of the night will be about Stelios Restaurant in Billerica. I hope you enjoy these videos, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. I'll be back when the day is new and I have more ideas for you, and you want things to talk about, and I will too. That's Mr. Rogers. And good night, everybody. And in the words of Dr. Thomas Sharkey, this action will not be tolerated in Billerica, Massachusetts. Bye now.